Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our monthly Renaissance Roundtable. This series is, in a way, kind of a cousin to our usual evening seminar series. Think more casual conversations, digestible snippets of projects, information, resources, while some of us might be eating lunch or taking a break from our busy work days. So it's great to see so many familiar faces and names, and also a couple new faces and names. So some people might be new to Sullivan Renaissance. So for those of you who are new here, Sullivan Renaissance was founded in 2000 by Sandra Gary to fulfill her mission of making Sullivan County a beautiful, vibrant, healthy place to live. What started as small grants for community groups to plant gardens and flowers has grown into 3 really robust grant programs. We have a variety of grants to fund different projects from $500 to $350,000, plus an awesome volunteer and intern program, horticulture and technical assistance, and more. We have a lot of our team is here today. Anne-Louise Scandariato, our volunteer program manager, is here. Carmela Uckel, our beautification program manager. Denise Ranchpani, our fearless executive director. And Liza Mitchell, who you'll hear from in a bit. Alan Carroll, our beautification coordinator, is also on. So thank you to everyone, the team, for being part of this. We're all resources for your projects, and we'll touch on that a bit in a while. So in addition to the work that I mentioned, community engagement, discourse, and education are at the heart of everything we do here at Renaissance. So that's why we've curated this program today to continue our Renaissance Roundtable series. Our first 2 roundtables are available on our YouTube channel. They covered historic preservation and litter. So they were really great programs. So if you're interested, feel free to watch those. But today we're turning to transportation and safety. There are so many ways that people travel through Sullivan County by car, by foot, by bike. Communities are strengthened when we provide safe ways for all to travel to work, school, home, and all of the places in between. Today, we are bringing together a panel of experts in this area to discuss different concepts around transportation and also some funding. So we are a rural community, as most of you know, and creating safe, walkable, bikeable communities doesn't just mean putting in sidewalks. It takes creativity, innovation, and commitment on all of our parts. So hopefully we can walk away today with some new strategies, ideas, and approaches to go forward. So who are these panelists? I would like to introduce Melinda Ware from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Sullivan County, Ian Thomas from America Walks, Jessica Rich, the Federal Highway Administration, and Liza Mitchell, who's our program assistant at Sullivan Renaissance. Hi, thank you for being here. We're so lucky to have you all. You're a wealth of information, and we look forward to what you're going to be talking about today. So each of these 4 people bring a different perspective, approach, experience, and we're looking forward to hearing what they have to say. So to set the scene for today, I'm going to turn it over to Melinda Ware. Melinda is a Cornell University statewide DEI facilitator and also the program director at CCE Sullivan County. Melinda graduated with an MBA from Mount St. Mary's College in Newburgh, and she currently serves as a human rights commissioner, a former Newburgh Housing Authority commissioner, and volunteers for several community-based organizations in her community. So wealth of knowledge, and we're happy to have you here, Melinda.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you very much for calling me an expert. However, I will put the disclaimer out there that I am not the expert on the subject matter. However, our staff member, Wanda Cruz, is our expert on this subject matter, but I'm going to do my best with the basic knowledge that I have on today, with hopes that when we come back together in September, that you'll have a more in-depth overview of her subject matter. She's dealt with our, we have a grant called Creating Healthy Schools and Communities, and Wanda is our communities expert. And today I'm going to talk to you about 3 subject matters, one being physical access, activity access, a Vision Zero plan, and our safety routes to parks and safety routes to schools. So beginning this, I would like to talk about the physical activity access, which is formally, we're in our second round of our Creating Healthy Schools and Communities grant. And when it says formerly known as Complete Streets, this is a project that was named Complete Streets, which most of you, if you work with municipalities, you've probably been introduced to that word. The second round of this grant is dealing with physical activity access. So this is a project that encompasses streets that are designed and operate to enable safe use and support mobility for all users. It includes people of all ages and abilities, regardless of whether they're traveling as drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists, or public transportation riders. So as you will notice, I tried to pick a generic photo that kind of encompasses all of that. And the concept is not yet, Shannon, I'll let you know, thank you. The concept is to encompass as many approaches to planning, designing, and operating roadways and rights of way with all users in mind to make the transportation network safer and more efficient. So when you're riding around and you see a lot of markings on the ground and sidewalks, this is a very functional depiction of physical activity access. You can see that pedestrians can cross the street safely, they can walk on sidewalks, they can also ride a bike, scooter, or whatever you have as a mode of transportation. This is also done through policies, and Wanda has done a number of policies working in Sullivan County with municipalities through the state, she does it through state, regional, and local levels, which is frequently supported by roadway designs and guidelines. Okay, you can switch to the next one. And then there's Vision Zero. I got my express class on Vision Zero today, but it provides direction specifically around the vision to eliminate all traffic-related deaths and severe injuries in the community. I know that through my research, my brief research, that New York City is really important. Big cities is really important for them to make sure streets are safe. Just making a left-hand turn can cause someone to end a life on a bike or walking. And we know that a number of these accidents have happened over time. This is just an advertisement. As you can see, it's a very poignant advertisement as to someone just walking across the street with a stroller. So Vision Zero is a very important plan. The goal is to eliminate traffic fatalities and severe injuries among all users, bikers, walkers, riders. So we want to make sure that everybody is aware of what's going on so that people are not involved in accidents. And they acknowledge the many factors that contribute to safe mobility, including roadway design, speeds, behaviors, technology, and policies. As I begin to look through it, I know that a number of us are very familiar with the speed counters that say slow down and flashing lights. That's part of Vision Zero to make sure that we understand that we have to follow these guidelines and make sure that everyone is safe. And it also sets goals to achieve shared goals of zero fatalities and severe injuries by managing those factors. In the chat box, I put a resource link. If you want to look up different, there's a fact sheet there. There's 9 components of a strong Vision Zero commitment. There's moving from vision to action, guidelines for effective Vision Zero plan, and what is a high injury network. So those are a few networks, a few resources that I provided The link is in the chat right now, so you can take a look at those. Next slide. And here is safe routes to parks and safe routes to schools. We know that working in Sullivan County, we are not a urban community, but a rural community. So Wanda works very hard at making sure that we have safe routes to parks and safe routes to schools through her connections and networks. And this is a way to make the benefits of parks and common venues like sports games, farmer markets, and festivals accessible for everyone in your neighborhood, town, city, and county. These connections include, but are not limited to, residential homes, early care, schools, work sites, parks, and recreational centers. They focus primarily on places whose conditions are dangerous, high percentage of, and it also works in high percentage of low-income residents and or historic disinvestments. And how does this work? Typically, Wanda works really hard in municipalities and with partners through new or improved pedestrian bike or transportation systems. So she works really closely with them to make sure that all of these places are safe for them. The combined new and improved land use or environmental designs, such as connecting everyday destinations while building environmental approaches that increase physical activity. And I wanted to kind of sum this up with these comprehensive approaches on parks, schools, streets, and its multi-sectional focus make them especially relevant for people who want to advance in equity initiatives, community engagement, and multi-agency coordination within their local government. So these are the three that I'm covering today. I'm sure that Wanda would have went more in depth about the work that she's done in Sullivan County. However, we have physical activity access, our Vision Zero plan, and always promoting safe routes to parks and safe routes to schools is part of what we do through the Creating Health in Schools and Communities grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. I appreciate that overview that, like I said, sets the stage for what and Liza will be discussing today. So next we have Ian Thomas. Ian is the state and local program director with America Walks. In this role, he develops and delivers education programs for advocates, professionals, elected officials, like all of us, about the benefits of walkable communities and strategies to create them. Ian was the founding executive director of the PedNet Coalition of Columbia, Missouri. And between 2000 and 2013, he established the organization, developed one of the largest walking school bus programs in the country, coordinated a campaign that led to Columbia adopting the first complete streets policy in Missouri, and was instrumental in reducing neighborhood speed limits. From 2013 to 2022, he also served as an elected member of the Columbia City Council, where he championed adoption of the city's Vision Zero plan, policy and launched several new community initiatives that focused on health equity and sustainability. So welcome, Ian. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thanks so much, Shannon. It's good to be here. I'm actually in England at the moment on a sort of a working / vacation. So it actually is the evening over here, and I know it's the lunchtime for all of you. So Shannon, I'll just say next slide when I want to move on, if that's okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about America Walks and then discuss some very recent data around pedestrian fatalities that just came out last week from one of our partners, Smart Growth America. And then finally move to, what we can do about it in terms of organizing in our communities and then applying for federal and state funding to make the improvements. So America Walks is a national education and advocacy organization. We engage in a lot of communications, as you can see from this slide. And next slide. We promote both walking and walkability through our mission. Could you move on to the next slide, Shannon? There we go. Oops, Our mission is to advance safe, equitable, accessible, and enjoyable places to walk and move, which is about walking, by giving people and communities the resources to effectively advocate for change, which is about this much harder concept of walkability, getting local governments to change policy and really redesign the community, because that's what it takes to create safe, walkable places. Next slide, please. So walkability is the ability to walk safely, and to be able to enjoy that activity, for it to be meaningful. There need to be destinations nearby. There certainly needs not to be a lot of fast-moving traffic nearby, and that's the general problem. But beyond that, walkability can look rather different in an urban area versus a rural area, where walkability often includes trails going through the countryside, or in a suburban area where it's the most difficult usually to create walkability, largely because things are so spread out. And so it's just a long way to walk somewhere. Next slide, please. So we have a number of programs. One is our webinar program. These webinars are all free. If you want to get the notifications about the webinars, just go to americawalks.org, sign up to receive our e-newsletter, and you'll hear about all of them. These go out at least once a month, sometimes twice a month. Next slide, please. Another program we administer is the Walking College. This is a much more in-depth kind of training. There are a limited number of fellowships every year, and the curriculum is identified there. It's a 6-month part-time online study program, and we take our fellows through this course to train them to be really effective walkable community advocates. Next slide, please. And we also periodically hold our National Walking Summit, where we bring people together physically. We haven't done this since just before the pandemic, but I'm hopeful we'll have another National Walking Summit next year. Next slide, please. So here are the data that just came out last week. Dangerous by Design is a publication by Smart Growth America. When the federal government finalizes their pedestrian death and serious injury data for a given year, Dangerous by Design takes those data and does an analysis. And because everything's been running rather slowly, we've only just received the data for 2020. But you can see here that the number of pedestrian deaths in the United States increased yet again. This is the 10th year in a row that the number of people killed while walking has increased. And it's now increased about 60% in the last 10 years, as people are walking more and putting themselves more at risk. And if you look at the gray bar there, the projected data, so this is not confirmed yet, it'll be a while till these numbers are confirmed, but the projection is that there'll be an even more significant increase for 2021. One of the most startling conclusions from this year's Dangerous by Design is that while the amount of driving people were doing went down because of the pandemic, pedestrian deaths went up. And it's become clear that traffic congestion, which a lot of people think of as a bad thing, and which local and state governments spend enormous amounts of money widening roads to try to reduce congestion, actually saves people's lives. And it's the congestion that is keeping the speeds down and meaning that some of those pedestrian deaths might not happen. And when we had fewer cars on the road, it's well documented that people were driving faster and killing more pedestrians. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, the most vulnerable people in our country are the ones who suffer the most from pedestrian fatality, just as with everything else. Black and Indigenous Americans are killed at much higher rates than the put it this way, the poor neighborhood you live in, the more likely you are to be killed while walking, because those neighborhoods have very dangerous high-speed streets going through them, and because those residents are more likely to be walking because they are less likely to own a car. Next slide, please. It's really important to understand the relationship between vehicle speed and the likelihood that somebody's going to be killed. These data come from the National Traffic Safety Board, and they show that at 20 miles an hour, there's really a pretty small, if you're hit by a car when you're walking and the car's going at 20 miles an hour, it's a relatively small likelihood that you're going to be killed, only 5%. However, if that car is going at 30 miles an hour, that likelihood goes up to 45%. And if the car's going at 40 miles an hour, you're now very likely to be a fatality statistic, because that percentage is up to 85%. So the message is clear. We need to slow down the cars in the places where people are walking. Next slide, please. So I just want to show a few slides here that illustrate the problems that we're dealing with in places where people are walking. This mother and her young child have just, risked their lives to cross this road. This is a road which is dangerous by design. It's far too wide, and there's absolutely no pedestrian facilities. Next slide, please. Here's another example of inaccessibility by design. This underpass is in Denver, Colorado. The Interstate 70 goes over the top. This is a big state highway that goes underneath. On one side of the interstate, there is low-income housing, and on the other side, there are hotels and restaurants where a lot of those low-income residents work. And this is the condition that is provided for people to walk back and forth to work. And next slide, please. And our communities are very far-flung. I mentioned earlier talking about suburban communities. The characteristic of the suburbs is that everything's far apart. You've got, a subdivision over here. The school is all the way miles away over here. The shopping district is all the way over here. The offices and the employment. And it's just very difficult. And this illustrates the problem people have wanting to walk to work or walk to the shops when we've designed our communities in this far-flung way. Next slide, please. So I'm going to wrap up by talking about funding strategies. But before talking about funding, I want to emphasize that communities should do a lot of work to prepare for applying for funds. And I've listed these activities in 3 categories here. First of all, you need to organize. And I know in Sullivan County, Melinda and Wanda have been working really hard on this, educating the community, building awareness, forming a local advocacy movement that understands the terrible toll that pedestrian deaths are taking in the county. And not only the fact that people are being killed, but people who are walking are having a miserable and frightening time of it. And a lot of people are not walking because the conditions are so awful. And we want people to walk because that is such a healthy activity. So designing communities where it's unsafe and unpleasant to walk doesn't make any sense. So organize a campaign, build a local advocacy movement, and develop a pedestrian safety plan or some kind of transportation plan that addresses walking and walkability. And having done those things, any community then is in a good position to apply for funds. And I'm going to talk briefly about each of these bullet points up here. Several of the available funds are part of the recently passed Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which was passed by Congress at the end of 2021. And then I'm going to mention a few other funding sources. So next slide, please. And I should mention that most of these funding sources, the applicant needs to be a local or regional government or a planning agency. Although have eligibility for non-profit organizations or even schools. So the main program is called Transportation Alternatives. There is a competitive application process that's organized by, in your case, the New York State Department of Transportation, as well as metropolitan planning organizations in certain regions. The grants require a 20% local match. So if you have a project for, $10 million, then locally, 2 million of that will need to be raised, and the federal program will provide the remainder. New York State has received $46 million for this program for 2022, or the fiscal year 2022, and the amount every year for the next 4 years after that will increase slightly with inflation. And New York State has not yet announced when applications are open, so this one's still on pause. Safe Routes to School is part of the Transportation Alternatives program in New York, although other states have a separate program that is just for Safe Routes to School. New York State does not prioritize Safe Routes to School, and has only less than one full-time employee working on Safe Routes to School. So advocating for New York State DOT to expand its focus on Safe Routes to School. And this, of course, is both programs that support kids walking and biking to school, and those all-important infrastructure changes around schools designed to slow down the traffic, add sidewalks, add crosswalks, and create a much safer neighborhood around the schools so that the kids can walk. Next slide, please. The RAISE program is essentially the same program as previous federal programs called, the first one was called TIGER, and the second one was called BUILD. This in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, this program focuses both on climate change and on addressing racial and economic disparities. It's for funding very large projects that kind of cross community and regional boundaries. It's only available for local and state government agencies, and $1.5 billion has been awarded for fiscal 22. The next funding cycle will open in fiscal 23. The fiscal 22 cycle has closed now. Safe Streets and Roads for All is a new program in the current bill with a focus on Vision Zero and towards zero deaths. And Melinda talked about Vision Zero, and as Shannon mentioned, I was very involved in Columbia, Missouri, becoming a Vision Zero community. This is a very good program. It focuses on the number of people being killed and injured on the roads. So if it is successful, and it's easy to judge whether it's successful or not, then we will achieve our objectives of creating safer streets and roads. And that application process is open right now. And $1 billion is available in fiscal 22. Reconnecting Communities is another new program this year, which focuses on reversing the harms that have been caused over the last 70 years or so with highway construction through African-American neighborhoods, through indigenous communities, through low-income communities, where people's property values and lives have been deeply harmed by really egregious acts by the federal Department of Transportation and state departments of transportation. And this is essentially trying to repair those harms by, in some cases, for example, Rochester, New York, filling in the can't remember what it's called, the ditch highway that was kind of cut into the city and used to segregate different racial and ethnic groups within the city, and building a surface level boulevard with lots of pedestrian and bicycle facilities and slow traffic, to taking down elevated highways like the Claiborne Freeway in New Orleans, to simply building more connections where community highway very impressed that the federal government has recognized the harm that it has done over many decades, not the present people in office, but that institution, and trying to repair those harms. And that application process is currently open until October 13th. Next slide, please. And I think this is my final slide. These are a few other funding sources which are not part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The Highway Safety and Improvement Program is focused on safety. New York State receives $120 million per year, and it is the state DOT that determines what the money should be spent on, but local communities can advocate and reach out to your regional your regional office of your state DOT to let them know about areas that should be invested in. And this year, up to 10% of HSIP funds can be used for safe routes to school programs and other community priorities. Increasing safe and accessible transportation options is a new program this year, and it can be used to create complete street standards, implementation plans, and project lists that are prioritized according to need. And finally, we have the Carbon Reduction Program, which is focused on reducing transportation emissions through funding pedestrian and bicycle facilities where that can eliminate car journeys. Total funding over the next 5 years is between $1.2 and $1.3 billion, and that's apportioned to states. And I think, Shannon, if you just go to my very last slide, I want to mention another, this is not about funding for safety improvements, this is about regulation. And the US Department of Transportation is currently reviewing the vehicle design standards, and one of the big factors driving that increase in pedestrian deaths over the last 10 years is the increasing size and weight of vehicles, which people like to buy large, high, heavy vehicles, which when a pedestrian is hit, gives them a much lower chance of survival. And we need federal standards that limit this. America Walks is running a campaign right now to advocate to the US Department of Transportation to impose strict limits going forward on the size and weight of passenger vehicles. All right, that's all I have. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Ian. You are such a wealth of knowledge, and hopefully we can get some of that funding here to Sullivan County. And if you have questions for any of the presenters at any point in time as well, please put them in the chat box, and we'll have some Q&A in a few as well. I do want to turn it over to Jessica Rich. Jessica is joining us from Tennessee today. She has a BS in civil engineering from North Carolina A&T State University and an MS in civil engineering from University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Jessica joined the Federal Highway Administration in 2003 as a safety engineer. She currently works for Tennessee Division, where her responsibilities include implementation of the Tennessee Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and the Highway Safety Improvement Plan, which focuses on improving crash data, reducing roadway departures, improving safety at intersections and in work zones, and improving safety for bicyclists and pedestrians. In 2021, Jessica was recognized as the Federal Highway Administration Safety Engineer of the Year by her peers. And on August 14th of this year, Jessica will be working for the Federal Highway Administration Office of Safety as a transportation specialist. So we're so glad that you're here today, Jessica. Welcome, and take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me today. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to be very brief. So the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, which was mentioned in the previous presentation, is one of the new programs that came out of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And this program supports the National Roadway Safety Strategy, which was released by Secretary Buttigieg and Second Gentleman Inhofe on January of this year. And this program supports local initiatives. So the funding will go completely to the locals for this program to prevent fatalities and serious injuries on roads and streets. And it will, heavily support our Vision Zero and Towards Zero deaths initiatives. And I think, as previously mentioned, it is a $1 billion per year program that's going to span from 2022 to 2026. So in the bill, they projected like $5 billion for this program. Next slide. And so this is all jumbled. I'm sorry for looking all jumbled on this screen, but the funding opportunity is open now. It opened in May. It will close on September the 15th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And you can submit questions. If you have any questions about this program that I'm not able to answer during this presentation, you can submit them to ss4a@dot.gov, but you have to submit them by August the 15th. There's also a website that you can go to with the notice of funding opportunity and more information about the program at transportation.gov/SS4A. Next slide, please. So who can apply for this program? Metropolitan planning organizations, and then public political subdivisions of a state. So in looking at the Sullivan County government structure, it looks like there are a lot of towns and villages. Any of you can apply for this program or for funding for this program. We also have tribes that can apply, and then a combination of any of those that I just previously mentioned can be applicants or joint applicants for this program. Next slide. And so as far as applicants, I just talked about who those are. Then you can also have partners. So previously stated, the state DOT cannot apply for this program. Private companies, interest groups cannot apply to be applicants, but they can be partners for this program. And so if you have some partners out there who are really interested in different types of safety projects, please ask them to be your partner in this program. Next slide. So there are two types of grants. Go ahead to the next slide. I'm trying to have good time. So the first type of grant is an action plan, and it contains 4 different components. You have to have leadership commitment. So you have to have a high-ranking official say, this is, we want to improve safety in our jurisdiction. And then as far as your planning structure, you have an oversight committee as well as a champion, and that champion is the person who keeps things going as far as, having a plan and making sure that it's being implemented. And then going into the planning process, you have to start with a goal of setting, a certain percentage of fatalities that you want to reduce by a certain time, or you can just simply say towards zero. Have a safety analysis where you look at your crash data and see where the locations or where the fatalities and serious injuries are happening. You have to have engagement and collaboration from all the different stakeholders. You may want to ask the general public, what kind of priorities do you want to have to increase safety? And then equity considerations, as previously mentioned, our department is very focused on equity and making things fair. And as far as implementing safety measures. And then on the last component, the output of all of the pre-planning that you do are the outcomes. What kind of policy and process changes are you going to have? What kind of safety countermeasures are you going to have? Projects, figuring out when the projects are going to be produced, and then evaluating all of that to see how effective your planning was. Next slide, please. And then there are supplemental activities that you can do, including updated crash analyses, trying to see what a quick build strategy is and how long it takes to build a quick build strategy. You can also do some surveying with some of your stakeholders in collaboration. You can do equity assessments. You can also apply for funding to do speed management plans or lighting management plans or any of those plans that will help you to figure out whether, how to improve safety in your area. Next slide. And then your implementation grants, that is the second kind of grant that you can apply for. And that is for any of the strategies that you identify in your action plan that you have to have before you can implement anything that is in the implementation plan. Next slide. So how do you apply? You have to register through the grants.gov website, and that can take about 2 to 4 weeks. So just keep that in mind. If you're trying to apply this year, don't wait until September the 14th. That's going to take a while. So apply through or register through the grants.gov website. They're going to give you a UEI number, and that will help you to submit your application into the for the program. And applications again are due by 5 p.m. Eastern time on September the 15th, which is a Thursday. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. And this is just to let you know that there are, all kinds of tools that you can use to understand more about the discretionary funding process, as well as the application process on grants.gov. And then there's a link there that can give you access to more information. Next slide. And then lastly, the Safe Streets and Roads for All website is located at transportation.gov/SS4A. And next slide. That's all that I have to present. So I'll take any questions in the chat box. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I appreciate it. And yeah, like you said, put any questions in the chat box and we'll be having a conversation shortly. We have one last panelist today who we're really excited to show a local example of some of these things that everyone's been talking about. And that is a safe route to a school here. So Liza Mitchell is our, I'd like to introduce our summer 2022 program assistant here at Sullivan Renaissance, Liza Mitchell. She's a 2022 graduate of Monticello Central School District. And last year, as an intern for the town of Thompson through Sullivan Renaissance, she participated in the Sleepy Hollow Trail cleanup. And she is attending SUNY Geneseo in the fall with a major in childhood education and a minor in business studies. So Liza's going to recap this project for us.
Thank you, Shannon. So part of our internship is to participate in a day of service in which we give back to the communities that we interned in. So last year, a group of interns and we did our day of service at Sleepy Hollow. So we connected the Sleepy Hollow apartment complex to the Monticello Central School District. A little bit about the trail is that half of it was on Monticello Central School District property and half of it was on Sleepy Hollow apartment complex property. We wanted to connect the two entities and work together with both to create a better trail. As you can see in the pictures, it was really unsafe. There was a lot of litter, overgrown plants. It was an unsafe entrance in between the trail and the school, and there was some brush and a lot of mud. A mother named Shanita Artson, who's a graduate of Monticello and now has kids who take the trail to school every day from Sleepy Hollow, created an idea and this dream to reimagine the trail to make it much safer for the kids to get to school. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So about 50 to 60 people gathered on August 10th, 2022 at Sleepy Hollow to create this trail and to achieve what Shanita's vision was. We had assistance from Sullivan Renaissance staff, interns, crew members, Sullivan 180 staff, Catskill Mountain Keepers, Sleepy Hollow staff, members of the school community, NYSEG, and many community volunteers. We litter plucked most of the trail. Almost all the litter was removed. We mulched the trail, removed major limbs and trees, and re-put down wood chips on the entire trail. Many of the kids, they really enjoyed volunteering and helping us with the trail, and They were excited. This created a spark for them to be excited to go to school in the morning and in the fall when school came back around next year. If the trail had not been reimagined, the alternative route was much longer and much more unsafe. It only made sense for us to connect the two entities. And when all the right people were present, we were really able to accomplish a lot, and we were able to reimagine the trail in just a day. So here's some images of what the trail looked like after we were done. And prior to it, I just think it's really important to remember that it was a goat path. There was no formality in the trail, and we created this. And I think that I took a lot of pride in that. And I think my fellow interns and I also took a lot of pride in that. And after, we heard a lot of success stories, kids who worked on the trail and have since maintained the trail and taken pride in what they've worked on. More people and families from Sleepy Hollow were able to come over to the school to spectate football games, basketball games, and other school events because they had this safe and accessible route to school. And most recently, we heard about an employee of the school district who said that she was only able to have her job this summer because of the trail, and she was only able to show up in a professional manner in professional business clothes because she had a safe and clean route to work and school. And if you go to the next slide, here are some photos of what the trail looked like this past Friday. So almost a year later, as you can see, it's been very well maintained. There's no trash. Everything is still in place. There was no vandalism, and everyone has really kept maintaining it very well. And most of this is because of the sense of pride that the residents of Sleepy Hollow and the members of the school district have taken. And the school district was helpful enough to take down the portion of the fence that was in the way of connecting the two entities.
Thank you, Liza. I appreciate that. And I think it goes to show that, you can get a lot of communities together around a project, and that some of these projects don't have to be, massive highway projects. They can just be these kind of one day exciting projects right in our backyards, literally. So thank you for sharing that success story. We do have some time for questions. If anyone has questions, you can put it in the chat, or you feel free to unmute yourself and just ask questions about anything that's been presented today. We've seen a lot of information. Are thinking, while you're thinking, I do want to mention that if you are interested in learning more, today was kind of a teaser to a larger all-day conference on these topics that Cornell Cooperative Extension is hosting in September. So September 22nd, mark your calendars. There's going to be a lot more in-depth information workshops on all of these concepts and funding opportunities for everyone in Sullivan County. It looks like we have a question in the chat. So Nicole asked, what would be the minimum width recommended for a 2-lane road to include a bike or walking path? I think that would be a question for Jessica or Ian, that you might have some insight on that.
I guess I'll take a stab at it. So you're talking about the minimum width of a 2-lane of the entire road. So the minimum widths of a lane are between 10 and 12 feet. And then the width of a bicycle lane is about 2 to 3 feet. But then there's also a buffer of like 1 foot. And so adding all of that up, 24, 5, about 27 feet. That's my guess.
That sounds good to me, Jessica. I'm not so familiar with the detailed standards for different types of roads as Jessica is. But I do know that a lot of existing county roads are very narrow. There are maybe 2 11-foot wide lanes with no additional hard surface, just a ditch right there, or a hedge or something which makes it virtually impossible to add dedicated pedestrian or bicycling, facilities within that right of way. So I always encourage rural areas to really explore developing a trail network, not just one road, but connecting multiple communities. And I know this is, can't remember if this is happening in Sullivan County, but certainly, the Empire State Trail, which spreads over, many other parts of New York State, is a great economic generator for communities, and connecting, finding ways to either using railroad easements or easements obtained from private landowners to have maybe a 16-foot easement with a 12-foot trail going, along the edges of fields and connecting communities together can really stimulate bicycle tourism. The communities become attractive. Investment in services for people who are visiting the community for the purpose of exploring the trails.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And to go to the next question, which relates to that, Freda asked, one of the barriers to complete streets in Sullivan is increased cost of paving areas for walking and biking. Can you address rural design factors that can keep costs down? Which it sounds like you just mentioned trails along fields. Are there any other thoughts you might have on that? Either Jessica or Ian.
Well, that was my suggestion for rural roads connecting, between communities. Now, inside communities and even rural towns, I'm thinking here of, county seats or some of the, towns of at least 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 population within the community. There's great opportunities to create complete streets in those towns because most of those roads are actually wider than they need to be, especially if, for instance, there's a state highway going through the town. The state highway very often is 5 lanes. You really don't need that amount of capacity in the highway. And if you repurpose some of those lanes, for instance, to protected bike lanes, or parking lanes. You can also use up more space, and this helps slow down the traffic by turning parallel parking into angle parking, and that allows room for more cars to park there and utilize the businesses and so on. Once you have angle parking, you can then have pedestrian bulb outs for the crosswalks, and putting in a crosswalk every block or so through the main part of the town is really important, so that pedestrians don't have to go a long way out of their way to cross the street. They can really at every main block and at every mid block is what I would recommend. It will slow the cars down, but that's a great thing because that will improve safety, as well as increasing the likelihood that people will see, well, this is a nice little downtown Main Street. Maybe I'll pull over in that parking space and go and get an ice cream.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I want to briefly turn it over to Freda, who asked that question. Freda Eisenberg is the Sullivan County Commissioner of Planning, and she's going to let us know about a pretty immediate action item that we can all take to encourage implementation of pedestrian and cyclist safety right here in Sullivan County. So Freda, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Shannon. I was so glad to see actually in both presentations mention of doing a pedestrian safety plan or some kind of plan, because that is actually what we are planning to seek funding for. The federal opportunity, I just got the note for this morning and is certainly on our radar. But even before then, we have New York State has its annual CFA funding opportunity grant cycle. And this year, New York State Department of Conservation, in its Climate Smart Communities program, has funding available to help communities their objective is primarily helping communities, reduce their carbon footprint by taking various actions, to become climate smart. And, in the sort of planning category, they list 19 different types of activities that you can apply for funding for. And running down the list, when I saw planning for walking and biking, I was like, yes, we have to do this. So Sullivan County is going to apply. The application is being written as we speak. And we're, with respect to the climate smart community, the county is certified at the bronze level. We are going to have to recertify to maintain that certification. So, we need to do this plan for that. But if you can go to the next slide, Shannon. I don't have to deal with this because that's, I think, been amply discussed before. So let's cut to the chase. We need support letters address your support letter to the county manager, but email it to us at planning@sullivany.us. And if you would like a template or, a draft before you put pen to paper or start keyboarding there, also just click planning@sullivany.us and we will send you a draft. We do need the letters by next week. Cornell and Renaissance graciously, I think, timed today's roundtable so that we could make this pitch to you before getting our grant in. So please, everybody, write us a letter. Oh, and just one other thing with respect to the federal program, we may be following through, since obviously the state funding isn't guaranteed. So Jessica, I may be reaching out to you for help if that's okay, or some questions.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And Jessica, did you want to answer Joyce's question that why is it necessary to complete these safety plans?
Please explain what, I think she said what is necessary.
What is necessary? Thank you.
Yeah, and so I have a slide about that, but it starts with leadership, having an explanation or having an endorsement from your leadership. And then you go into developing a structure. So you have a committee that is comprised of what we call the 4 E's: engineers, educators, emergency response people, and enforcement, who are, have knowledge about highway safety and the different elements of highway safety. And then you also have a champion that is driving that. So you have to have someone that's going to, drive the development of the plan, as well as keeping the committee together and calling meetings, etc. And I also I didn't talk about this, but sometimes you have a consultant. A consultant is really helpful that will also help you put the plan together. And then the next parts of the plan is developing a goal. How many fatalities and serious injuries do you want to reduce by a certain time frame? Or maybe just say we're going to go towards 0. You look at your data analysis, see where the issues are happening within your jurisdiction, and then you develop a list of strategies to go after those those issues. And then you talk about how you're going to evaluate the plan. You may want to use some crash modification factors to evaluate the plan. That may be an additional activity. You may hire some consultants to evaluate the plan to see how everything is going. And you meet about, in Tennessee, we meet 4 times a year to look at our strategic highway safety plans. And so you develop a method of figuring out, how all the different activities are being addressed, and you kind of develop an implementation plan or some kind of performance metric to see how each of those are being addressed. Did I explain that well?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And
you're welcome.
like we said, to save the date for September 22nd, we're going to be diving in to these even deeper, and we hope to see all of you there. And I will put up our contact information as well. And so always feel free to connect with us here at Renaissance. We won't be having a Renaissance Roundtable in the month of August, but we do hope to see you all at the conference in September, and we'll be putting out details for our Renaissance Roundtable in September shortly. So thank you all so much for being here, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thank you.